Alright, welcome to a video for these two wonderful cars. I do apologise, I'm incredibly unprofessional doing this kind of video. I actually managed to do the introduction and the conclusion all in one video later, and it comes across rather odd. So if you can wait, basically this video is going to form two road tests, first with the Lexus, then with the Honda, and then a walk around and conclusion, which I said was meant to be separated, but I didn't. So as I said, this certainly isn't Top Gear quality production. It's not meant to be. Hopefully you enjoyed the video anyway. So, flip of a coin, it's the Lexus that I'm going to drive first. As I said, with the sorry, just move the seatbelt away. So walking around the cars, you get a feel for how the car looks and how it aesthetically, at least anyway. And it's interesting when you get into the cars and then immerse yourself in the vehicle, because of the differences, and it's all about first impressions, I guess, when you get into any car. Japanese cars, in my eyes, tend to have a very similar feel, certainly the best ones, the Hondas and the Lexus of this world, where when I'm sitting here straight away, I don't first of all feel as though I'm in an old car. It feels immediately incredibly solid in the structure, and you can tell that straight away. Sometimes you get in a car, especially over some sort of jiggly road surfaces, cars can be a bit kind of creaky and groany. You get the impression that things are moving in the dash and in the consoles. Yet this thing, is 12, 13 years old, but it still feels incredibly structurally stiff and solid. The driving position is fantastic. You've obviously got a multitude of adjustments, but the same with the Accord. But getting a sort of straight ahead natural driving position is a doddle. When you're in the car, you very much feel as though you are in it. Again, there's lots of sort of cliches about kind of cockpit designs and making you feel certain ways in cars, but you do feel very much kind of in this, kind of sat down. Maybe it's the height of this here that kind of helps, but visually it's very appealing. It's obviously lots of black, so it's kind of dark and somber in here, but when you got the kind of the light trim, sort of silver tungsten-y kind of looking trim here, and then you've got the little silver inserts, you've got the silver sort of chrome bits around various parts of the console here. It's enough visually just to sort of break things up. The detailing is the Japanese love buttons. They like you to press things, and I'm a fan of that. So you get the impression you're in something which, again, like a very high quality kind of hi-fi. The labelling, the detailing, every single actuation of every button has a very satisfying feel to it. Little beeps as they engage or select something. The display by modern standards, of course, is awful, but it isn't. It's actually really, really good for its era. But the whole feel is of a high quality product. There's no two ways about it. The thing I like particularly in the Lexus here is the instrument cluster is beautifully detailed. Really love it. It is like a kind of a really high, nice watch face. Some really good manufacturer. They've clearly gone to a lot of effort to design this. Steering wheel relatively thin rimmed, actually, with the little bolsters at the 10 to 2 position rather. Again, it all feels nice in hand. So immediately, if you're in something that's been constructed well, it is a good place to sit and drive the car, in terms of the kind of the basics of the driving position. In terms of kind of layout of controls, everything else, it's very, very good, especially kind of for its era. You get in the car after a little while. There's a little bit of hunting around for things when you first get in them, as with any car, but actually, it becomes relatively easy pretty quickly. I wouldn't want to be sort of fiddling around with the radio necessarily on the move. The air conditioning system is actually very simple to operate on the move, but generally just getting in, driving the car, it's a very nice place to sit, I have to say. To argue with that tractor, I'm going to go through his slurry now, which is always good. But straight away, driving the car, the impressions mechanically are, you've got the ride is firm but not uncomfortable. It's kind of got that sort of stiffness, but the ability to absorb at the same time. The sharp ridges, they'll catch it out, like this one here. You feel it, but it doesn't grate. It doesn't. You think, oh, I'm gonna have to try and avoid that, and the car takes them well. When you go into the first corner, steering is really nicely weighted. It's positive. It feels old school, but in a really good way. You feel as though the weighting they've got about right, because again, the problem with sort of over light power steering is it just makes the car feel kind of a bit nervous in some ways. But again, you got a car which you feel as though you could drive long distances, and you wouldn't be sort of apprehensive about taking that journey on. But the flip side is, when you do start sort of pushing the car a bit, the car is capable of responding. The chassis, obviously rear-wheel drive, it's got a lovely natural balance to it. When you turn in, you get kind of that kind of slight lean as the car digs into the corner, but then it holds its body position very well. So the initial impression is it feels, slightly soft in that sense on the initial turn in, but actually it's doing it for a reason. It's settling the car into the corner. I'm not going to be leaning and sliding the car, obviously. But, as an overall package, the balance between how it delivers its ride and its handling is really nicely done. And again, I keep coming back to this thing about the age of the cars. It doesn't feel 10, 12 years old. It feels much more modern to drive than that. The engine, of course, is simply superb. It's almost inaudible. Take over now, just literally can hardly hear it. Pulling away now, just to make sure no one's behind me. It just sings so quietly, picks up speed in a very linear manner. It's just this constant surge that takes you up. It doesn't feel that quick, but it gets up to speed very quickly. And that's a sign of a very refined car. And here I am, 60 miles an hour, can't hear the engine at all. The most noticeable noise, again, which you get, maybe obviously tyres are a bit older on the car now, so they'll drum up more noise anyway, but it's the road noise you'll hear more than wind or engine. It is the most noticeable of all of them, but not jarring in any way. And that's not a very nice road surface. I know that from doing previous road tests on it. But I also know that sort of fresh new tyres of a decent make quieten things down noticeably as well. But it really does drive well. It'd be interesting to see, because obviously the whole point is that I want to jump in one and out and then into the other, and to see how the Accord feels immediately by comparison. But we will find out. So the turn of the Accord, going down exactly the same roads as the Lexus before. Again, first impressions are, when you get in the car, again, an incredibly solid vehicle. Build quality is simply sensational, really. It just feels really solid. In some ways, when you look at it, maybe it doesn't look as solid. It doesn't have that substantial feel that the Lexus gives you when you sat inside it, but that's only an impression because it is just as solid. One thing I would say, when you get in the car, it looks more modern as soon as you get in. It may be something to do with the layout of the center console here. The big rotary knob with your, for your various functions is kind of, it feels like it's sort of 5 years newer in that sense. You feel, again, when you sat in the car, that you're probably sat higher up, but you're not. You actually then feel as though you sat lower. It's a really bizarre feeling, and that's maybe to do with the center console not being quite so high. You don't feel sat in the car as much as you do as in the Lexus. But like the Lexus, you have the perfect driving position, easily adjusted to, again, same multitude of adjustments. One thing I noticed, it sounds a really petty thing, when you put your hand down the side to adjust yourself. I know you're meant to do it when you're stationary, but sometimes you find you want to change things. On the Lexus, you've got this slight, where the door bin is, the cup holders to the back here, and you've got to kind of scrape your knuckles down the side of the plastic to get to the adjuster. But on the Honda, you don't have to. It's much easier in that sense, and that's a really trivial thing, but I'm here to pick up on things, of course. But sitting inside the car, again, you feel as though something nowhere near the age of the car. It's a very nice place to sit. I like the sat-nav screen is recessed. Again, visually it's quite nice, but obviously it helps with reflections, I guess. That's the whole point of it. In terms of controlling the car, there's things I prefer about the Lexus, there's things I prefer about the Honda, is along the short of it. I think I prefer using the radio in the Lexus. It's easier to function. I prefer the air conditioning system in the Honda in terms of its operation. What I love about both of them, of course, is that same tactile feel with all the switchgear. It's beautifully engineered. I love the labelling, again, for exactly the same reasons I loved it in the Lexus as well. Again, it's that kind of high-end, hi-fi feel that you tend to get with them. All the major functions controls have, again, a very similar feel to the Lexus. Steering wheel feels slightly thicker rimmed in hand, and no better, no worse for that, in all honesty. That's just a personal preference. I probably slightly prefer this one in that way. In terms of instrument clusters, the Lexus, the detailing I love on the Lexus, I have to be honest with you. I love the layout of the Honda. It's your classic Honda dash layout, like the big motorbike versions, if you like. I keep thinking of them, they're very symmetrical. You look at it, I probably can take the information in more quickly with a Honda, but by a nanosecond. So I can look, I know exactly what I'm looking for with Lexus, because there's this beautiful detailing. You're kind of slightly distracted by how beautiful it is in a way. You kind of just stare, lovingly at it. With a Honda, it's very much, there's your information, done very nicely by comparison to virtually any other car. But I'd have to say, I probably prefer the look of the Lexus in that sense, and only that. In every other way, you jump in both cars and you're set for very comfortable driving. The seats, again, beautifully supportive, in exactly the right areas. I probably prefer the Honda seat slightly. I think I've got slightly more bolstering higher up in the Honda. The one thing then when you get on the move, you start to look at things like, how does the car feel? How does it sound? When you pull away with the Honda, you think, oh, crikey, it's a bit loud on the tyre noise. But then that kind of dies away a bit. It's really weird. You get a bit of a rumble but that's very typical of the Hondas. They generate a bit of noise, but then it seems to sort of just level out. Whether it's got noise cancellation, I don't know. They may well have. But so you don't feel as though it's noticeably noisier in here than in the Lexus. Straight away, the chassis I've always maintained in this 2.4 is absolutely astonishing, and that's helped by the steering, which is just brilliantly done. It's just, the weighting is perfect, the precision, the accuracy of it, I just absolutely love. It gives you total confidence in the car. When you turn in, you get kind of that lovely motion. The car moves as one, more so than it does in the Lexus. But when it digs in brilliantly. And again, I'm not going to be driving fast in the car to try and show you that about understeer, oversteer, handling balance. I know from having driven enough of these in anger how unflappable the chassis is. It is an astonishing chassis. It really is. And the more you drive them, the more you appreciate them. And then it's the things that I didn't expect, I guess. The ride, I reckon, is more composed in the Honda. It's, when I've driven them in isolation, I think, it's got that firmness, that nuggety feel that the Lexus has got. It's got all of that. So it's slightly sportier in feel, but actually you're getting less motion through the car. Definitely through the seats. With the Lexus, especially at low speed, you get like a sense of bouncing. It's tiny, it's marginal, it's not important really, but it is in the finer details of the comparison between the two cars. This one, I said, it has a firmness to it, but it's very well controlled. Neither are uncomfortable, in all honesty, but I'd have to give, again, the Honda the nod when it came to, which is a surprise to me. I wasn't expecting it in terms of its ride in isolation. Where it does definitely win is in agility. The Lexus is beautifully balanced, it's serene, it's fluid in its handling. The Honda just takes it to another level. It is brilliant. The body control is fantastic. The more you lean on it, the more you appreciate just how good this chassis is, even by modern standards. It's not using stupidly low profile tyres which look pretty but ruin the ride. It feels very sophisticated. And I said, it's very interesting, having driven the Lexus directly before, to sort of gauge how different they feel in that sense. But as I said, it's a personal preference. Other people might prefer the Lexus. I readily admit that. But when you turn in, you feel as though the body sits flatter on the road. You feel as though you're in a bigger car, which it probably is by tape measure. It feels wider. But if the car was soft, you'd definitely feel kind of it keel over more, and you don't. It feels that corners, very, very flat indeed. The brakes on both cars are really good, by the way. Both, you touch them, they're really positive. It's a really interesting one, I have to say. It's when you jump in one to the other, they both have their very distinct characters. The Lexus very much feels like you're in something, it feels like a shrunken GS, but an athletic GS. It feels serious, it feels mature. The Honda, by comparison, feels kind of livelier, more enthusiastic, more willing to engage with you, and yet doesn't ruffle your feathers at the lower speeds and over sort of the jittery roads that we can get, whereas the Lexus actually does, more so, which, as I said, I think that's the biggest surprise I can take from this road test. In terms of ultimate refinement, there's very little actually to choose, and it surprises me as well. One thing I love about this Honda is the keenness of that engine. This engine is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It wants to rev, it's keen to rev it. You can feel it drawing air into its lungs as it picks up the revs, but it's flexible. It's as flexible as the Lexus in that sense. It's not as silent as the Lexus, but it's a good not silent, because the sound it makes is lovely. If you prioritize, I guess, absolute quietness is the all-important reason to buy a car, you would probably buy the Lexus. but you're not going to feel shortchanged than the Honda when you drove one next to it. So especially ride along like I am now. Yeah, very interesting. Having driven both totally different in their characters, but similar in lots of ways as well. Hi there, right, so welcome to a video. It's amazing really. About a year ago I lucked into having a Lexus GS 450 and a Honda Legend of similar ages and mileages, and did a video which is self-indulgent because it's not professional. I don't get paid to do this or anything like that. It's just for me really, because I love these cars. And here I am, by pure fluke, got a 2010 on a 59 plate Lexus IS 250F Sport, and at the same time, a few days later, I managed to secure a Honda 2.4 EX automatic, both with very low mileages, very similar mileages, 50-ish thousand miles, both in lovely condition, both beautifully looked after by the main dealers. But this isn't the point of the video, it's actually a comparison. And it is purely subjective. It's not here to cause angst or frustration amongst people who are watching it. It's just purely, as I said, it's self-indulgent for me because I love both cars. But first impressions, when you look around the cars, both are very clean examples, by the way. I think they're both in the best colours that were available on both cars. The Lexus, when you look at it, is sophisticated. That's the first thing I'd say. The wheels fit into the car really nicely. The proportions are really good. It still looks good to this day. It's a handsome car. And as I said, I think the white really suits the car. The wheels, again, as I said, because you can have them slightly further forward, been rear wheel drive, it just sits so nicely on the car. It's got kind of an elegance to its design. It's very simple. The proportions are really nice. You come around the back of the car, it sits sort of bum high in the back, sort of short in the back. A little lip spoiler there as well. Twin tailpipes on the back, oval in shape. It's a really, really handsome looking beast, but in a very nice, subtle way, I have to say. Yeah, I really like this, especially in this car. Sorry for the crunch, I really tripped over myself then. Then you come to the Accord, which, obviously they built these from 2008. This is the facelift version, but in terms of the flanks of the car, everything's the same. It looks a more dynamic car. It's slightly different in that sense. Very Japanese in styling, but all the better for it, in my opinion. You tend to have more sort of flat edges to the panel work, which again, very much of its time, but it's aged brilliantly well. It looks wider, bigger than the Lexus. Front on, again, nice looking beast. A big sort of beak design on the sort of the grille there. But it's nice. It's really nicely proportioned. It looks slightly bigger than the Lexus in terms of the kind of dimensions of the car. I'd say that the wheels sit better on the Lexus than they do on the Honda, only because they look slightly more in proportion to the car in terms of its size, but that again may be an optical illusion. When you come around the back, again, you've got the light design looks really good on the back of the Honda here. Twin tailpipes round by comparison to the oval on the Lexus. But externally, they are both really handsome cars, and it becomes a personal preference, because, and also almost a case of kind of Sophie's choice, because which child do you say is the ugly one? Well, neither are. They're both beautiful in their own way. But there we go. Let's come into the boot areas of both cars. I mean, they're both big. Obviously, they're saloons, so you have a smaller aperture. Quick release seats with the 60/40 on the Honda there, and come straight across to the Lexus boot, which I'd say looks slightly smaller than the Hondas, not quite as practical. Little sort of ski hatch design in the back, so that probably the Honda wins in terms of practicality in the boot area at least. Let's come to the interiors of the car. So the doors open now. Honda again, you've got obviously a lighter, more modern looking interior. Loads of room in the front. Leatherwork looks really lovely on these cars. Coming into the back again, fit and finish is beautiful on the car. And again, the lightness of the interior sort of it's very appealing. I come straight across to the Lexus. In the back, you've got this lovely kind of half leather, so I guess it's Alcantara in the middle there. The Honda's probably got slightly more in terms of rear leg room in the back, but again, I haven't put a tape measure to it. It's just the impressions you get. And then come to the front, again, you've got this lovely looking interior, and the first thing you just look inside and you just know you're looking inside a really nice quality car. It's coming under the engine bays now. You'd expect the Japanese to present them well, and they certainly do. Obviously the Lexus here, something I don't like on modern cars, but actually it's been done beautifully. It's covered in sort of plastic shrouds and everything else, and the way that manufacturers like to do these days. You have sound deadening on the engine cover there. You also have sound deadening under the bonnet there as well on the Lexus. Obviously it makes it so quiet. Then you move across to the Honda engine bay. No such problems with engine covers. That's how I like to see an engine bay. I mean, others like it in a different way, but I just love to see an engine, especially one as beautifully presented as that. Obviously you don't get the engine cover on that, the sound deadening. You get the sound deadening across the expanse of the bonnet lid there. But yeah, I'm old school. I just like to see an engine where you can actually see it properly. So finally, conclusion time. Well, it's almost impossible to choose. It's a bit like supporting a football team. If you've got a preference, you'll choose the one you prefer, I guess. Looking around the cars, they both, in my eyes, sit wonderfully in this day and age. They've aged beautifully, gracefully. But it does, if I was to jump in one of the cars and I was doing a complete mix of driving, I'd have to pick the Honda. The chassis, more than anything else, I just think is so good, so engaging. It's a wonderful car. The Lexus, again, beautifully refined, beautifully built, beautifully engineered, as you'd expect of any Lexus car, and great to drive. You're not going to be shortchanged in either of them. They are two wonderful examples of their era, and as always completely overlooked by the motoring press and journalists. But for me, I'm a Honda man. Clearly, I've said that many times. I would pick the Honda, but by goodness me, it's by the smallest of margins.